So as the executive director of CAJE, the Center for the Advancement of Jewish Education, it's really such a pleasure to see all of you here tonight, eager for education, excited to learn more about Israel. Why do we sponsor this evening? Because for more than 80 years, our community's award-winning Center for the Advancement of Jewish Education has been at the forefront of fostering Jewish learning and leadership in Miami and beyond, spanning all aspects of Jewish education, from early childhood through adulthood. CAJE designs and supports innovative, dynamic, and challenging programs that inspire, motivate, and connect learners. I want to once again thank everyone sponsoring this evening, but especially give a shout out to Adam Shevin, who underwrote this evening's experience in the entire series with Hartman throughout this entire year in memory of his parents, Jerry and Roberta. Roberta, Zichrona Livracha, was not only a past board chair of CAJE many years ago, but years later, she became a valued member of the CAJE staff and was a personal friend to me and many of you. She would be especially proud of Adam for supporting CAJE and Jewish education this evening. Now, for any questions that arise during the discussion, we are going to be distributing index cards to you, and we have two CAJE staffers who are going to help out this evening, Carla Spector from Adult Learning, wave, and Debbie Brody-Weiss, CAJE's Director of Development. They'll be handing out index cards all through each row and some pens if you'd like to take one and pass the rest along to others. When you've written a question, pass it up to the front, either here to Debbie or over to me and Carla, and we will make sure it gets to our speakers before the Q&A period at the end of the evening. We're honored tonight to hear from Rabbi Dr. Donniel Hartman, president of the Shalom Hartman Institute, who holds the Kaufman Family Chair in Jewish Philosophy. He's the author of the book Boundaries of Judaism and Putting God Second, How to Save Religion from Itself, and his very latest book, Who Are the Jews and Who Can We Become, was a 2023 Jewish Book Council Award finalist. Donniel's also the host of the award-winning podcast For Heaven's Sake, together with his colleague Yossi Klein Halevi, which, as you heard, ranks consistently as the most popular Judaism podcast in the English-speaking world. He's also the founder of some of the most extensive education, training, and enrichment programs for scholars, educators, rabbis, and religious and lay leaders in Israel and North America. And he's a prominent essayist, blogger, and lecturer on issues of Israeli politics, policy, Judaism, and the Jewish community. And tonight, Donniel will be in conversation with my colleague, Dr. Bella Tendler Krieger, CAJE's own Director of Adult Learning and Growth, which runs pluralistic adult Jewish educational classes and programs throughout Miami-Dade and provides education for the Miami Jewish Film Festival, which is kicking off, note your calendars, January 9th, and many of the films are taking place right here at the Hub. Prior to this position, Bella served as a professor of history at Yeshiva University and held postdoctoral positions at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton, the Global Jewish Studies Program at FIU, and the Kogod Research Center of the Shalom Hartman Institute. She is also a member of the inaugural cohort of Rabbanut North America, the Hartman Beit Midrash for new North American rabbis. So I'm going to ask each and every one of you to please make sure your phones are on silent so that we don't interrupt the discussion. Debbie and Carla are going to be passing out the index cards right now so that you'll have an opportunity to write your questions throughout the evening. And at this point, I'm going to turn it all over to you, Donniel and Bella. The bima is literally yours.
Thank you. I don't think we need this, right? Okay. We do need it?
No.
Yeah, I think we're on. I just want to confirm that the camera is on. We did promise that okay, excellent. Donniel.
Hi.
I am so incredibly honored to be interviewing you tonight. You've been my teacher, you've been my rabbi, and I'm so proud to introduce you to our community here in South Florida. You and your ideas. Now, for many of us, myself included, your podcast with Yossi Klein Halevi, For Heaven's Sake, has been a window into Israeli society, allowing us insight that we would not otherwise have, particularly over the last 14 months since October 7th, when you shifted your focus to Israel at war. Now, as Americans, it's hard for us to comprehend the combined impact of the initial massacre, the ongoing plight of the hostages, the seven-front war, the casualties, the reservists who have to leave home and their families for months on end, the displaced communities in the north and the south, the halted economy, and all this on top of the internal discord gripping Israeli society over judicial reform, drafting the ultra-Orthodox, the hostage exchange, the Netanyahu trial.
I'm tired.
Yeah, I'm tired of even talking about it. How are Israelis coping? Is civil society surviving? And how much longer can it go on like this?
Hi, everyone. One of the things that I love most about Israel, I'm going to get there. It's been 3 weeks. One of the things that I love most about Israel, you ask how long will it last? As long as it has to. We're strong. We're a strong people. Israelis are great people. Really great people. We suffer. And the price is great. But we show up. And we do what we need to do. And it's one of the most beautiful things about Israelis. You know, not all Israelis, you know, as someone reminded me today that there are some Israelis who don't show up, which is another issue. But for those who are participating in building this dream of the Jewish people, we show up. And we've always shown up. That's the truth. Since the beginning of the state, we've shown up in sometimes the most impossible situations. You know, I don't know if this is the hardest time in Israel, but it's certainly the hardest time in my lifetime. And Israelis, I think we recognize from judicial reform to the war that our survival and the nature of our country is on the table. These aren't trivial times. It's not trivial times. And I'm very proud to be an Israeli. Extremely proud. They aggravate me. Pushing is unnecessary to Zionism. You could stand online. But it's a great people. And if anybody had any doubt at how great Israelis are, it's not just these last 14 months. It's these last 2 years, 2+ years. And in very different levels. It's interesting. For a year, we showed up to fight for the democratic soul of our country. To fight for what type of country we want to live in. And we showed up in ways that proportionally no democracy shows up this way. We showed up. And we recognized that it's not about a little judicial reform. You know, if it's a little judicial reform, what intelligent people, serious people, could have different opinions on how you're supposed to select Supreme Court justices? Big deal. That wasn't the issue. There was a sense that everything was at stake. And that the protector of our country, very often from ourselves and from our own passivity, was going to be neutralized and that the country would be different. And we stood up and said, I want my Israel. I want my Israel. And it was remarkable. And then this last 14 months, we stood up and said, I have a right to be safe. I have a right to be protected. And for the first time in many of our lifetimes, we felt that the safety of Israel was in question. None of us experienced that. Israelis are principally post-1967 Jews. We took Israel's safety and security for granted. And it's not that Hamas or October 7th alone was endangering the existence of Israel. It wasn't as horrific as a day as it was. October 8th came and our army started to respond with tremendous force. But we were facing a strategy that was brilliant. A brilliant Iranian strategy to take apart and to undermine the survival of the Jewish state. They realize that they can't win with ground troops, and they can't win in conventional war. But the idea of terrorism, unconventional war, and missiles, especially in a country so small, was actually a brilliant strategy. Brilliant. And we realized that everything was at stake right now. For millions of Israelis, normal life stopped. Just stopped. And the same force which was fighting for the country that we love was again fighting for the country that we love. And we showed up. And I want to tell you, we will show up as long as it's necessary. That's Israelis. We show up as long as it's necessary. It's hard. I have to tell you, there's a huge amount of PTSD. Huge amount. There's a huge amount of trauma. There's a huge amount of sadness. There's a lot of people in Israel are sad. They're just sad. One of my closest friends in the world and my jogging partner, Gil Troy, his son personally knows 40 people who died. Like, just think about that for a second. You know, if like we could tell, and everybody, you know, you wait. The most, the scariest words in Israel are the words, ha'erev or haboker, hutar lepirsun. Either tonight, this evening, or this morning. It is allowed, we are allowed to report. And then you report. And Israel's a small country. We all know each other. The amount of people who know people, it's like this. It's been hard. But as long as necessary, we'll show up. That's our people. And by the way, I want to tell you, I wasn't asked this, but first of all, it's lovely to be here with you. And I've traveled across America. And not only am I meeting every single person who listens to For Heaven's Sake, it's just an interesting experience. I'm meeting a lot of lovers of Israel. There's a lot of noise about our enemies and a lot of noise about people leaving. I am meeting a Jewish community that's also showing up. It's showing up. And we Israelis aren't alone. And that's also a big deal. And you're also going to continue to show up as long as it's necessary. Because that's what we Jews do. That's what we do. So, that's where we are.
Thank you. So, there's something that's hard to miss about the war. You spoke about casualties, and we hear about the casualties as well, the fallen soldiers. When we hear about them, they disproportionately come from the religious Zionist sector. They come from religious neighborhoods and from West Bank settlements in numbers that are disproportionate to their representation in the country. And I think the same is true with regards to military commanders of elite units. They increasingly rise from the religious Zionist sector. Now, what do you make of this? Is there a passing of the baton from the secular Zionists who founded the country to the religious Zionists who are stepping up in the military today? And since Israeli leadership generally emerges from the military, what would you say are the implications of this shift for Israeli society, for the state of Israel, but also for its relationship with diaspora Jewry, who may not necessarily identify? Yeah.
So first of all, thank you. That's the first time I've been asked this question in 3 weeks. So I'll, kudos. Let me tell you a story. You ready? So first of all, people who grow up in the religious Zionist community grow up with a very, very powerful ethos of service. Service regardless of what it demands of you. And it is unbelievably commendable. People who grow up in the religious Zionist community grow up with serious values. Values of love of the Jewish people, values of love of the land, and values that it's on you. Very, very strong, very powerful. But the numbers of people who are dying or are casualties is skewing a more complicated story. First of all, casualties come from all over. All over. There's casualties in Tel Aviv. There's casualties in Herzliya. Secular Jews, traditional Jews, Orthodox Jews are fighting side by side with unbelievable heroism. Unbelievable heroism. One of the things within the religious Zionist community is that there are certain units that they volunteer for especially. Certain elite infantry commando units. It's not that religious Zionism is serving more than the rest of the country. But there is an ethos of serving in certain units which happen to be in the war in Gaza, to be at the front line in ways that other units aren't. Less tankists died than Golani, for example. But it doesn't mean that tanks are less, those who serve in tanks are less committed to serving the Jewish people and protecting them. The war in Gaza exposes, it's a horrific war, but it exposes particular units to much greater danger. And those are units which the religious Zionist community focuses on. So this war, if it was, in Lebanon, it wasn't disproportionate, and over the last 20 years in Judea and Samaria, or wars against terrorists, it's much more, there's certain units which are their units. And it's very important to remember that. Also, many people, like 8200 is one of the most important units for the safety and security of Israel. Most important units. Huge competition. No one's dying in that unit. But it doesn't mean that the people who are serving there because they want a free ride. It's very important that we value every single person. Women. They're the great heroes of this war also. Our women soldiers. Tatzpitaniyot. How do you say tatzpitaniyot in English? It's not exactly lookouts because they're
Scouts?
looking at their screens. So they're looking at something, but they're not looking out, they're looking down. They're looking. They're looking. They're watching. What? Maybe. Border analysts. Let's learn a word. Tatzpitaniyot. And they're all tatzpitaniyot. Women soldiers. With the exception of Hartman High School, we have the only modern Orthodox school in which almost all the girls serve in the Army. The Army's not allowed to recruit in any religious Zionist school with the exception of the Hartman Institute. And the default is not national service, the default is serving in the Army. And many of our girls are officers and tankists and 8-200 and all this stuff. Tatzpitaniyot, who told us what was coming, we just didn't listen. Turns out that they suffered terribly too. So it's a more complicated story, and it's important because sometimes the story we tell is not meant to tell a story, it's meant to create, not yours. I want to come to the essential part of your question, to create a sense that I'm a better Zionist than you. I'm a better Zionist than you. My daughter, this is in English, so they probably won't hear it, so it's okay. My daughter is married to a boy who grew up in the settlement of Beit El. And his parents, her parents-in-law, still live in Beit El, and she goes there every couple of weeks for Shabbos. And they're very fine people. And there was some comparison of different schools, of which schools are better than other schools. And there were a number of schools that got very high matriculation marks or whatever. And her father-in-law was talking to my daughter, who's the principal of our girls' school. And he said, "What values do you teach your girls?" And she responded, and she asked him at some point, "How do you rank which schools are more valued, not amongst girls?" And he said, "That's easy. Where are there more casualties?"
Oh my God.
Now, I can understand that, but is that the way you measure value and Zionism and a love of Israel and a commitment to the Jewish people? You want to measure service? I'm in. You want to measure hours? I'm in. Dying? Part of the challenge in the religious Zionist community is there used to be this ethos in Israel, it is good to die for your country. When I made Aliyah in 1971, I was at the end of that conversation, but I still got it. Like, to serve, to be willing to die, to get a medal, like, you manipulate. That's why you draft 18-year-olds, by the way. It's the perfect balance between physical ability and stupidity. It is. You don't, it's like, it's a whole thing. I wanted a medal. Like, that's what you do. And I told an audience earlier today, I don't use my right eye. And my left eye is not very good. And when I was drafted, the Army took one look at me after the eye exam and put me in a non-combat unit. So I wrote them and asked to be retested. And I cheated on my eye exam. And I became a tank commander, the eyes of a tank. Because that's the way I was raised. Not to do that was just not to be, you didn't count. We have kids in our schools and all over the place who are practicing, not to get a higher SAT score, they're practicing and running so that they could get into more dangerous units. So there, part of the religious Zionist community has shifted to this, there is a death culture, which is not somebody just, I'm back. So I want to commend everyone who serves. I want to commend the families. My brother-in-law was killed in the war in Lebanon. And I know, my sister, her life it never goes back. And his kids, it's like a scar for life. And when I see these families who with unbelievable courage get up in the midst of their greatest pain and still say, I love my country. I love my country. I have tremendous respect. But the story of the war is more complicated. The service is more complicated than the mere counting of the casualty list. That said, it is true. In the more elite combat units, the religious Zionist community is 10 to 12%. And in some of the more elite units, especially as you go to the junior officers, you sometimes get to 20, 30% in the religious Zionist community. They're slowly rising also in the command. Vast majority of them are people of great principle, great love, great moral commitments. There are some, a minority, who were raised with a very strong us-them ideology and chosenness of the Jewish people. And there are some of them whose standards don't fit the standards of the Israeli army. And the army tries to deal with it, but it's getting a little more complicated. One of the interesting things that has been observed is that the religious Zionist community is very often 20 years behind. Military career is no longer a stepping stone for a political career. No longer is. It actually doesn't work. So they might be actually in the wrong page. And the real test of service of Israel is not only who's dying for Israel, every ounce of respect it has to be given. But it's who wants to build in Israel. And the challenge of religious Zionism is not merely going to be whether you're going to be willing to die for Israel, but do you have a vision which will enable Israel to live? And to what extent does the holiness of the land take precedence over the holiness and safety of the people? These are serious issues. Now, the religious Zionist community has a lot of power. Their party has a disproportionate amount of power given the particular government. And they are strong in journalism. The future of Israel is also going to be shaped by this community, and we have to work. It's a complicated community. There are multiple forms of religious Zionism. Nobody's monolithic. We like to make everybody monolithic because it makes us feel better about ourselves. But they're also much more complicated. So it's a story, but it's a story that North American Jews, and you're right to ask it, are waking up to, because you all know about the Haredim, and you know this. There's another community, and by the way, they're not settlers. There are no settlers. It's like nobody's a settler. There's citizens of Israel who live in Judea and Samaria with the support of the Israeli government. There's a small, minuscule group who do whatever it is they want to do whenever it is that they want to do it. So it's a mainstream part of Israel. It's powerful, and it's true. For many of them, their vision of Israel is not commensurate with yours, even though, by the way, most of them are very pluralistic when it comes to issues of state and religion. They're not interested in religious coercion. They're not interested in telling people what to do. For them, issues of security and land, and in the more extreme cases, they adopt ultranationalist positions, which are going to be challenging. But a lot of them are serious allies. Remember, Naftali Bennett grew up from that community. He's still a part of that community. And he represents a different vision. So watch it. It's an interesting story. We spend the Institute works with every denomination and every tribe in Israel. We spend a lot of time trying to make sure that there is a strong liberal trend within the religious Zionist community, because they're part of the story. And you're right to notice them and to watch them, to respect them for their sacrifice. But dying is not the sole indication of service and love for the Jewish people. I know it was a little long.
No, not at
but
all.
It was you asked me a really complicated question, so I apologize. I hope it was
and
clear.
In fact, if you don't mind, I want to push back a
Go
little.
for it.
What you are describing, a little background, I'm a scholar of Islam. So, you hear about shuhada, shaheeds, martyrs, and the mixing of religion and politics, and we always criticize the Islamic world for that. But everything you just said kind of smelled of that too. This exaltation of death for your cause, and also mixing the political fight over land with a religious kind of semi-messianic idea. I mean, what's going on? Is this struggle becoming religious in the way that we like to criticize?
Yes, it absolutely is, but there are also distinctions. There's almost nobody, while not all Muslims are celebrating this death Torah either. There's almost nobody within the religious Zionist community that doesn't distinguish between combatants and non-combatants.
Right.
They don't. Doesn't mean all of them are as careful. There are some. But this, have you all heard of Baruch Goldstein? Is that a name that everybody heard of? Do any of you remember when Baruch Goldstein went into, how do you say Marat HaMachpelah in English? The tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron. And I believe he murdered 27 people while they were praying. You remember Baruch Goldstein, right? That was 1997. Who's the second Baruch Goldstein? Who came after him? Ben Gvir? To call Ben Gvir a Baruch Goldstein, to the best of my knowledge, Ben Gvir never shot. His words harm, but he never killed anybody. He's not a very good, he doesn't drive. He hires bad drivers. But he's not, it's a great, first of all, kol hakavod to you, young man, and I wish you well and safety, and it's good stuff, so kol hakavod. But you can't name another one. Now remember, every single person in the West Bank lives under constant danger. They've had family members assaulted and killed since the Second Intifada. Every one of them is armed. Every one of them has access to automatic machine guns. Where's the second Ben Gvir? Excuse me, I'm sorry. Where's the second Baruch? I did that just to see if you were listening. We do that in the evening to keep you awake. When was the second Baruch Goldstein? Sometimes we tend not to accept the nuance and the decency. Like, we want everybody, if I disagree with you, I want you to be bad. And I want to be good. And the world is divided between the good and the bad. But that's not the way the world is divided, and you know it very well. There's a lot of good people who also do some bad things. There's a lot of good people who advocate for a lot of good things, and sometimes advocate for things that you think are bad. And there's a lot of bad people who do a lot of good things. And living in our world requires of us to have some of that nuance, to give people the credibility and the credit for making some of these painful decisions. It's true. There is no doubt that religion is getting more and more involved in Israeli political life. Very often not for the good. But the religious Zionist community have been marching and walking a very fine line. And despite having the means and the ideology, they're not shooting up innocent civilians. So there are some hilltop, a small segment, who sometimes go on rampages. And it's true, it's terrible. We have to put them in jail. And right now, our Minister of Homeland Security is not even putting them in jail. Not even let the police arrest them. It's not even listening to the security forces who are telling them when there are people who are about to engage in an attack. We have some bad actors. But they themselves are also. They're more complex and complicated. And all of us will do well in our world. And I'm not talking about America, by the way, because I have enough tsars. When I want to feel good about Israel, we sort of think about you. Our world, we don't do well when we make everything so simple. We don't do well. And part of the way we're going to heal our societies is we're going to have to live with people who we disagree with. That's part of our world. And we're going to have to heal. And in Israel, it's the same. And part of my work with the religious Zionist community is to realize we share a lot. Let's find out what we share. Let's find out what we don't share. Now, there are people who cross the line. Ben Gvir, Smotrich aren't people who share some of my core commitments to Israel as a democracy. Their idea of democracy is very different than mine. They have a majoritarian vision of democracy, which believes that whoever is the majority has the right to do whatever they want to, and it's not limited by the inalienable rights of minorities. So they're my ideological foe. Let the cultural battle begin. But even when I battle people, it doesn't serve us well to simplify the complexity and the struggles and also the beautiful parts that are inherent within them.
Thank you so much. My next question, also related to religion, I suppose. So many Americans don't know this, but the Hartman Institute in Israel runs an egalitarian, pluralistic, non-denominational rabbinic ordination program, the Beit Midrash for Israeli rabbis. Since its inception in 2015, you have graduated nearly 100 rabbis. In fact, the Hartman ordination program I'm participating in North America is modeled on the success of your Israeli program. So can you explain what need in Israeli society you are seeking to fill?
Yeah.
And how does the Hartman program differ from the denominational rabbinic schools that are already out there?
One of the key principles of the Hartman Institute, our commitment to religious pluralism, is not merely to respect people who are different than me, but it's to understand that difference is necessary if Judaism is going to thrive. We're not the same. We're not the same people. We need different rabbis. We need different teachers. We need different answers. Sometimes we have very different questions. Anytime someone wants to monopolize the gateways into Judaism, most people stay outside. By the way, I'm not talking about this yet. It's the same thing with Zionism. If somebody controls who's a good lover of Israel, most Jews are going to be outside. But in Israel, one of the great paradoxes is that the only religious minority, the only religious group in Israel that doesn't have religious freedom are the Jews. We're the only persecuted religion in Israel.
What?
Every group has a court which fits their own belief system. There are 10 religious courts for 200,000 Christians. Chaldean Greek Orthodox, all 6 of them, have their own religious court. Ethiopian Orthodox, Evangelical, Catholic, Roman Catholic, Greek Orthodox. But for the Jews, there's only one, and it's Orthodox. And most Israelis feel themselves alienated from Jewish life. They don't even see themselves very often as participating in this religion called Judaism. They call themselves non-religious. You, Rabbi, you define this, your congregation, beautifully as a Zionist egalitarian synagogue. I never heard, it's a beautiful, by the way, I'll join that denomination, by the way. What? It's a secret?
It was supposed to be.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. But I think you should be proud of it. You should be proud of it. This is a reform shul. What, you're not religious? Because you're not Orthodox, you're not religious? Would it even dawn on you to say that the only people who are religious are Orthodox? That's insane. If you are engaging in our tradition, you're religious because you're dealing with Judaism. You could be secular religious. You don't have to be outside. Israelis have feel disempowered from their tradition. So my commitment to religious pluralism is not to respect merely the fact that there are people who are different from me, but the recognition that we have to teach very different Judaisms so that every single Jew will find a way for them to breathe. Like, I'm an Orthodox rabbi-ish. I'm like a little strange. I keep a big part of Jewish law. Not everything, no one keeps everything. But I keep a big part. I keep Shabbos, I keep kosher, the Jewish holidays. Thank God there's no sacrifices. By the way, that's half of the 613 commandments are built around the sacrificial system. But I'm an Orthodox Jew, but I believe that I am halachically obligated to change Jewish law whenever it violates my moral conscience and my moral principles. Judaism cannot stand in opposition to my moral principles. And even if I'm not certain that I'm right, that's what I believe, that's what I know. And a Judaism which violates my morality is an inferior Judaism. That makes me, as an Orthodox Jew, sometimes lonely. But I built that Judaism because that's the only way I could be a Jew. I couldn't be a Jew otherwise. And at many periods of my life, I wondered whether I could stay within this tradition called Judaism. I have a very complicated relationship with God. Very complicated. There's some people who say that he likes me or she likes me. But I'm ambivalent. I, from a very early age, had difficulty believing in a God who intervenes in history. I had great difficulty in miracle. It's just, my experience, I had great difficulty with that. My God created the world and then turned it over to us. Now, why am I telling you this? I worked really hard to build a Judaism that I could live with. I love my Judaism. But I love it because I had the freedom to make my choices and to be honest to myself. I haven't had a petitional prayer. I haven't asked God for anything since I'm 16. And I can't. My wife, she has an intimate relationship with God, speaks to God all the time, asks God for things, feels that if she can't ask something from God, she would be in the midst of a terror that she can't handle. As some of you know, I shouldn't be alive today. There's no reason I should be sitting here. My tank was blown up, and there's no way I should be here today. My wife is convinced that I'm alive only because every single day she went to the kotel to pray for me. 2 weeks after I was almost killed, my brother-in-law was killed. For me, I can't square that equation. Doesn't mean I'm right. It's just who I am. I can't square it. I can't say that God saved me but didn't save my brother-in-law when his plane was shot down. So that's me. Now, a lot of people think I'm insane. My wife thinks I'm insane. I don't want to save my wife. I don't want to change my wife. But she needs a Judaism that she needs, and I need a Judaism that I need. We have one of the only rabbinic programs where I don't ordain people who agree with me. I don't look for people who agree with me. I look for people who could help the Jewish people, who could help them, who could teach them a Torah that they could hear. One of the best students in our program, he's a star, is a gay man who's secular. And he came to me and says, Donniel, why are you ordaining me? I said, because the Jewish people need you. I could reach some. You could reach others. You could reach others. So, listen, I love the denominations. I don't want to undermine. I never speak badly of them. Because that's part, anybody who finds meaning anywhere, it's not like the Jewish people are winning. Like, we're doing great. Anybody, wherever you go, who can make a Jew love Judaism more, who could excite you and touch you, whether it's through prayer, whether it's through study, whether it's through music, whether it's through culture, like, bring it on. We gotta elevate the story. So there are people for whom denominations are important. All the power. I'm not post-denominational. I'm multi-denominational. Alongside those denominations, I ordain conservative and reform rabbis. Many of the people in our programs affiliate with these movements. Some of them are even ordained by the denominations. It's just, I want to make sure that every Jew, I believe that every Jew has the right to build the Judaism that could inspire them and speak to them. And one of my missions in my life is to give the Jewish people those types of leaders. So I get excited, and I tell all my students, our goal at the Hartman Institute is not for you to agree with anything that any lecturer gives. You don't have to agree with us. My job is to inspire you to think and to develop your own take. That's my job. You agree with me some of the time, you don't agree with, and we have a diverse faculty. You're getting the whole gamut. Get to work. To be a Jew is not to be a spectator. To be a Jew is to be a player. Play. Build a Judaism. For 1 second, never say, I can't be part of this tradition because this tradition says A, B, C, and I can't believe it. Great. Play. Play. Build it. Demand of yourself. And my job is to enable you to have rabbis and teachers and books and Torah that could accompany you on that sacred journey.
Magnificent. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could return us in the time that we have left to a political question,
Sure.
if we can come down from the clouds a bit. I want to ask you a question about the Arab Israelis, or Palestinian Israelis, who make up 21% of the population of the State of Israel. And to clarify, these are the descendants of the Arabs who stayed in Israel after the 48 War, and were granted Israeli citizenship. So on October 7th, the Arab Israelis were killed and kidnapped alongside Jews. And we've heard stories of Arab-Israeli heroism in the face of the attacks, how some sought to protect their fellow Israelis. We also know, or we hear, that Druze, Circassians, Bedouin Israelis all serve in the IDF, and even some Muslims do, mainstream Muslims do. We've heard that since the start of the war, many Arab Israelis feel an even greater identification with Israel. They say that they prefer living under Israelis versus a Palestinian rule. But at the same time, The ongoing war and the growing Gazan body count have deeply disturbed the Arab Israelis who are watching their literal cousins die. And on the Jewish side, many Jewish Israelis have grown increasingly suspicious of their Arab Israeli neighbors as a potential fifth column. There have been interrogations and arrests. Distrust and division are mounting. As someone who has focused on building shared society within the state of Israel, what is your hope for the future? Can Israelis, both Jewish and Arab, move past this? Will we ever have a shared society?
The simple answer to a very, very difficult question is yes. Of course we will, because we're going to work at it. But because the answer will be yes, the challenge is enormous. It's enormous. There's not one single person in this room would want to be an Israeli Arab Palestinian right now. While I do believe that it is better to be an Israeli Arab Palestinian than to be an Arab citizen of almost any other country in the world, not one of you would want to be an Israeli Arab Palestinian. Not one of you would want to be a national minority, a Jewish American, the way and live in the environment of an Israeli Arab Palestinian even after October 8th. It's very hard for them. Their desire to remain Israeli citizens didn't start on October 7th. For years, decades even, over 85% of Israeli Arab Palestinians regularly poll and say, if there would be a two-state solution, where do you want to live? And they all say, I'd like to live in Israel. I don't want to go to a Palestinian state. I don't want my village annexed to a Palestinian. I want to be an Israeli. They do. That said, they have a complex identity. They're Israeli, they're Arab, and they're Palestinians. They're not Israeli Arabs. Please get used to that. They're not. They are part of a group that sees themselves as a national entity. They have a national identity. That's not a problem. We're not the first nation state with a national minority. America is the nation of nations. Jews are a nation. And you could be American Jews or Jewish Americans. Now, many people question, like we get nervous when people talk about dual loyalty. Who are you really loyal to? American Jews have always been insulted by this. Because who's more loyal to America than Jews? We're the best citizens of any country. We're the best. We give everything. Everything. Even when the country is not so good to us. But we've proven that dual loyalty works. And in fact, by the way, everybody has dual loyalty. I wish you had dual loyalty. Most people, I don't know how you say 10 loyalties. It has a word, whatever it is, doesn't matter. We have loyalties to our religion, we have loyalties to our state, we have loyalties to our community, to our families. People live with multiple complex identities and as a result have complex loyalties. That's the story. Now, Israeli Arab Palestinians have a particularly complicated time for two reasons. A, part of their people are at war with part of their nation. They are. How do you work that out? There was no denial of October 7th, nor embracing of October 7th amongst Israeli Arab Palestinians. The condemnation was universal. Sometimes they got aggravated. I shared this with some of the rabbis beforehand. They got aggravated when Israelis would ask them to condemn October 7th. And my colleague who runs all my shared society work, Rana Fahom, She got up after a couple of weeks and said, I didn't say anything for 2 weeks. And you all wanted me to post a condemnation, and I didn't. And she said, you know why I didn't? Because I felt that you weren't asking me to condemn October 7th. You wanted me to validate my humanity. I'm not validating my humanity to you. You're questioning my humanity? You think that I would embrace of October 7th? But we tested them. And it's very hard for them. So while they condemned October 7th, by October 12th, they saw and felt the consequences of Israel's Air Force bombing of Gaza. And they saw the pictures that no Israeli saw. They watch Al Jazeera, they don't watch Fox News. And they don't watch N12 nor do they read Times of Israel. And they watch Telegram, which shows, Jonathan told me, shows pictures of dying and burned civilians. Their family. They had great difficulty embracing the justice of the war when they felt that Israel was fighting the war unjustly. And I've spoken to them and talked, and we're at a dead end. I say this is a just war, and they say, how could this be a just war if this is what you're doing? They're torn. They're torn. Complex loyalties will always do that to people. And part of what you have to understand is to recognize that because someone has a complex loyalty, it doesn't mean they're not loyal to you also. It's just complex. It's complicated. They don't know what to do. And part of what's made it worse is that we Israeli Jews have never accepted them. We never have. We've never seen them. We've never cared for them. We tolerate them. We see them as a demographic time bomb. What does it mean for a citizen in a country for the majority to say, you endanger my existence every time you give birth? Just think about it for a moment. What does that do to you? I'm a citizen. Because I'm having kids? By the way, there's 7.6 million Jews and 2.2 million Israeli Arab Palestinians within the borders of the state of Israel. There is no longer a demographic time bomb as long as we solve the conflict. But within Israel, there used to be. Now Jewish birth rate is higher than Israeli Arab Palestinian birth rate. So not only is there no longer a time, it's getting better and better. There's no demographic. Part of the problem is that for many Israeli Jews, we still think that we're in 1947 or 1948. And we don't realize that when there were 600,000 Jews in 1948 and 2 million Israeli, and at the time they were Arabs. We worried. But part of our problem is we don't know how to win. We know how to win, we just don't know how to recognize that we won. We're stuck so often in an old story that's just not like, Israel's a remarkable success story. Let's embrace it. But for me, one of the great tests of Zionism is going to be how we treat our Israeli Arab Palestinian minorities. They have to write all over the world and say, I won the lottery because I get to be a national minority in the Jewish people. A people who believes that what is hateful unto you, do not do unto others. That is the whole Torah, and the rest is commentary. A people who are a national minority and were persecuted, and they know that they are supposed to treat me in accordance to the way they would have wanted to be treated. And it's remarkable. But we haven't done that. We're still frightened in ways that we shouldn't be. They've never been a fifth column. Never have been. They deserve greater loyalty. They deserve greater support from us. They deserve a greater share of the social welfare pie. We have to build new cities for Israeli Arab Palestinians. Their growth rate, they have nowhere to go. There hasn't been a single new Arab city built. We have to build cities. We have to expand their industrial zones. We have to come up with a process for how their families could become citizens. Someone who has one Jewish grandparent gets automatic citizenship. If you're a child of an Israeli Arab Palestinian or a father, there's no way for you to become a citizen. Now, when we were 600,000 people, I can understand. We're 7.2. Get over it. You won. We could come up with a serious process of acquiring citizenship that doesn't only give preferential treatment to Jews. We could build a nation-state law which declares Israel as the homeland of the Jewish people, but also the homeland of the Palestinian people. Doesn't take anything from us. We're strong enough. We could be a nation of all of our citizens and a homeland of the Jewish people. We can do it, but we're not. And that's one of the reasons why it's also hard for them. They want to be citizens in Israel, but they don't feel respected and seen. I'll end with just this, and it's something that I shared with the rabbis beforehand. Part of our work in shared society is that we're working to build young Palestinian leadership who will be leaders in the community and who will help push to a new future, both for Israeli Arab Palestinians and for our shared life together. Who are ready to move us to a better world. And this group came to my home. This first cohort was in Haifa, students from Haifa University and the Technion. And they had a weekend in Jerusalem over Shavuot, and I invited to my home for Shavuot dinner. And one of the stars of this program, a beautiful young lady, said to me, "Donniel, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? What's your agenda here?" And I said to them, "What do you mean? You're my people." He said to me, "What do you mean?" She said, "I'm not a Jew." And I said, "I'm not just a Jew either. I also have a complex identity. My people have 3 communities. Jews who live in the Jewish people, the children of Israel today, are Jews who live in Israel, are Jews who live outside of Israel, and are the non-Jewish citizens of Israel. You're part of my people. I'm Israeli. You claim me. I'm responsible for you. Your well-being and future and ability to be or live a fulfilled life here in Israel I owe it to you. Loyalty is the essence of what communities create." She started to cry. And she said, "In my whole life, I've never experienced the fact that a Jew cares for me and means well by me. All I've ever experienced is that Jews want to put me down." And so I started to cry too. And I said, "I want to do better. And I'm going to do better." And all of us have to understand that we came home and we've built a remarkable country. But it's not yet done. Bobby, what did you say? An even better Israel? We have a great country. But the minute you believe that our country is perfect, that's when you begin to worship idols. Jews are never satisfied. Now, in the case of Israeli Arab Palestinians, we have a great opportunity. I believe Zionism is going to be tested by how we treat our minorities. And it's hard for them. It's hard for us. We have a lot of work to do. But the answer to whether we'll succeed, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, we got some
questions.
zingers here.
Be nice to me. It's been a long trip.
Yeah. Well, we want to give you something memorable before you go home. Okay. You said that every Jew has the right to build a Judaism that speaks to them. Does this include non-Zionist Judaism?
Great.
Yes, I will repeat the question.
Are you ready?
Do you want to repeat it or?
No, you go for it.
Okay. Our questioner asks, you said that every Jew has the right to build a Judaism that speaks to them. Does this include non-Zionist Judaism?
I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to now go back, for some of you who are old enough, go back 30 years. 30, 40 years. And let's ask the question. Could somebody intermarry and still be part of the Jewish people? 40 years ago, 50 years ago, the answer wasn't yes. When I was a rabbi of a JCC in Tennessee, New Jersey, someone who was married to a non-Jew could not serve on the board of the JCC. Part of what's changed, here you have to understand something. Judaism as a religion is also a sociological phenomena. And as such, the boundaries of our tradition aren't just shaped by Torah, they're also shaped by what the Jews do. Intermarriage used to mean leaving the Jewish people. Now we know that it doesn't. Those who marry non-Jews aren't assimilating. And not only are those who are marrying non-Jews not assimilating, but there's at least 2 million non-Jews who've never converted who are part of the Jewish people. They have complex identities too. They come to shul. They raise Jewish children. They're part of us. The Jews have changed. Today, 70% of Jews who get married outside of Orthodoxy, which is 8% of America, are marrying non-Jews. 70%. That means a minority. Now, 2 Jewish parents is the exception to the rule for the next generation of Jews. Can you intermarry and remain within the Jewish community? Of course. Not only can you, you are. Can you be a non-Jew married to a Jew and be part of the Jewish people? You are. It just is. So Orthodoxy has no intermarriage. That's great, because if you want to intermarry, you leave Orthodoxy. Great. It's like in my yeshiva, there were no gays. It's like, wait, no. No, it just doesn't happen. It's like, great. Like, what? It's just, this is part of what the Jew, and look, we, as a sociological phenomena, you can't create boundaries that exclude large segments of the community. But you know when intermarriage really became part of the Jewish people? When we as parents refused to walk away from our children. Like, my children haven't intermarried. But I told them, I'm not walking away from you, no matter what you do. Your problems are my problems. You bring it on. There's only one boundary that I have, and that's riding a motorcycle. If you ride a motorcycle in Israel, I don't want to hear from you. You're not part of you're nothing. So my daughter wanted to buy a motorcycle and drive because she lives in Tel Aviv. So I put my foot down and bought her a car. You know, some of us are just tough. You know, like we don't, like this is, you know, we're strict. But we don't walk away from our kids. I wouldn't. There's nothing my kids would do that would cause me to walk away from them. Nothing. It's just not going to be. And that's what Jewish parents decided with their intermarried kids. And I want to tell you, because you decided that, not only did you sustain your deepest love and relationship with your kids, you also kept your kids and your grandchildren Jewish. I'm not saying it's always great. I'm not saying it wasn't easy. I'm not saying that that's what you would have preferred. But that's who we are right now. We are an intermarried people. That's just a fact. And part of what Jews do is we embrace facts. So now I want to aggravate you. And now you're 50 years ago in that same place. I understand that southern Florida is a strange place. And I appreciate it. You're strange. But for most Jews in North America, and I meet tens of thousands. I don't meet a few. I meet tens of thousands. And I meet rabbis and teachers who meet hundreds of thousands. Hundreds of thousands. There is rarely a Jewish community, a Jewish family outside of southern Florida which doesn't have a child right now who's struggling with Zionism. Struggling with Zionism. It's there. They're asking questions that aggravate you. Now, we make distinctions in intermarriage between an intermarried couple who decide to raise their children in another faith. That's one thing. There's intermarried couples who decide we're not going to give them any religion. Their kids are going to decide, as if kids decide. That's the way. Narishke. And between interfaith marriages in which the family decides that the religion of the family is going to be Jewish. We make those distinctions. We feel differently. Amongst anti-Zionism, we're going to have to develop the same level of nuance. There's a difference between people who deny that October 7th happened. There's a difference between people who, because of whatever distorted, immoral universe they live in, believe that October 7th was a good day. That's a disease. If your kids have that disease, it's an impossible position that you're in. And there are some, but by the way, it is very, very rare. Not just in southern Florida. Much of the anti-Zionists in North America condemn and mourn October 7th. And didn't declare that Israel was a genocidal state on October 8th. That's not that group. That's not who we're facing. And if we are, that's like interfaith marriage who are deciding to raise their children as Christians. It's a different story. And you would mourn that as a parent. But a lot of our kids have questions. And right now, Zionism is not doing what it needs to do to keep them inside. For many of them to question means they have to go outside of the Zionist community. There are many people identifying as anti-Zionists because Zionism doesn't have room for criticism or for questions or for struggles. Can someone be a Jew and be an anti-Zionist? Objectively, the answer is of course they can. Just like you could be a Jew who doesn't believe in God. Just like you could be a Jew who doesn't observe any of the holidays. Of course you can. Does that mean that their Jewish life is great? No. Does that mean that you have to accept their Judaism as something that you want to emulate? No. But what happens is that we are now, whether you like it or not, and I apologize if I'm upsetting people, there is a new front line now. American Judaism is the only Judaism in the world in which anti-Zionism is beginning to grow within the Jewish community. It's small. most of it is not really anti-Zionist. Most of it is just angry at Israel. Most of it is angry at some of the things that Israel is doing. So what do? How do we enable our children to feel that we love you, we respect you, and that we understand that your questions are legitimate even if I don't agree with your answers? We're going to have to learn a new Torah, a new art. Now you could say, I'm going to kick them out. You could decide to be like the ultra-Orthodox who decide that anytime someone passes your boundary, they're outside of the community, knock yourself out. But that's not the way we Jews work. Right now, our kids and our grandchildren. Listen, I have members of my board who, if you go to Israel, I'm never going to have a relationship with you. People are saying that. I was lecturing in a synagogue. If you continue to support Israel, I'm walking away. Right? They're pushing. So how are we going to answer? Are we going to answer by saying, you're outside, or are we going to talk? Are we going to be good parents and not walk away from our kids and say, I have to create a Judaism, I have to create a Zionism that has room for you? And I want to tell you, just like with interfaith marriage, in the 60s and early 70s, when you married a non-Jew, you thought you were leaving because the Jewish people said you're leaving. I want to tell you, anti-Zionism will become a marginal feature in the Jewish community when we complexify and create room within Zionism for the types of questions that now our kids don't feel have a place within the Zionist camp. We just have to do better. And we have to understand that our kids, and I do this when I counsel parents of interfaith marriages. Like there was this woman who came to a lecture and she started crying. She felt that she was a failure. What did I do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong. Our children aren't going to be like us. You remember you said to me last night? It felt like a long time ago. When you said you grew up in, where was it? In Colombia, where the only question was, how am I going to support Israel? That was the only option. Weapons for Israel. We're buying weapons for, there was not even do I like it? It wasn't like here. Israel's fighting. My job is to ask, how could I help Israel in what it's doing? I don't question what Israel, it's not my job. I don't live in Israel. My job is to fight for Israel and do everything in my power. Well, the next generation of Jews aren't like you. I might want them to be. It would have been great, but they're not like you. And they're going to need different answers than you needed. And are we going to be smart enough? See, I don't believe in a Judaism that could survive without a deep, intimate, and vibrant relationship with the state of Israel. But we have to earn that and work for it.
Thank you so much, Donniel. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bella, Donniel, thank you very much for an enlightening evening, really an uplifting evening and an eye-opening evening. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. I want a special shout out and thanks to members of the Hartman professional team who are here, Rabbi Lauren Birkin, the Vice President and Director of Hartman's Rabbinic Initiatives, Tammy Brass, Managing Director of Philanthropic Engagement, Judy Rosen, Florida Engagement Officer, and Joanna Berman, Development and Program Coordinator. And again, thanks to all of you for coming out and supporting Hartman. Donniel will spend a few minutes out in the lobby signing his book for anybody who's interested. And I want to close again by encouraging all of you, anybody who's interested in considering joining us in Jerusalem this coming summer, please come see me, come see Nancy. We'd love to experience Hartman together with you. Thank you very much.